What I'm about to tell you is something that no one is talking about, at least not yet. But everyone will be, probably very soon, as this Trump and Republican manufactured government shutdown continues. And if you know me, you know I bring receipts. This is a really important episode of The Breakdown, so I'm very glad you're here. Thanks for joining me. Aside from the shutdown bombshell I'm going to tell you about, I'm going to cover the mobilization of military against American cities, more atrocities from ICE as they return violent agents to duty, and how Stephen Miller is pulling all the strings. I'm Allison Gill, and this is The Breakdown. All right, first of all, thanks to everyone who watched our MSW Media Midas Touch collab of Andrew McCabe's side of the story in the Comey indictment from the Unjustified podcast. Over 750,000 of you listened to that show here on Midas, and we're so heartened that so many of you are committed to the truth, so thank you. All right, let's talk about the key thing you need to know about the Trump and Republican government shutdown. If you didn't already know, let me be the first to tell you, Republicans can end the shutdown any time, and they can do it without a single Democrat. Republicans are doing their best to pin this on Democrats because they know how much pain the shutdown is going to cause. They know how unpopular it is, and not just with federal workers, but Americans writ large. Of course, things like your student loan bills are going to keep coming in the mail after Republicans sued to stop Biden from forgiving your student debt. Oil drilling is going to go on. Of course, coal plants, Trump's tariffs, the construction of the Let Them Eat Cake ballroom is also going to move forward unabated. But all the Democratic programs that the billionaires have been trying to get rid of since forever so they can steal our money to give themselves tax breaks, all that's going to go away. And they love it. SNAP benefits, WIC, our Affordable Care Act tax credits are going to expire at the end of the year. Of course, the release of the Epstein files is on ice now. The courts are going to be funded through October 17th-ish, but past that, all those civil cases against the Trump administration will be on pause, except for emergency filings. ICE is going to keep working. And the message from Trump is that this is all the fault of the Democrats. I've been sent dozens of emails received by federal workers who have been sent language about their furloughs and their pay being taken away, saying that it's because of Democrats. Here's just a tiny sample of the dozens of ones that I've received. Here's one from the Small Business Administration, saying Senate Democrats voted to block a clean funding bill. Here's one from the Department of Homeland Security. See that? Senate Democrats are blocking its passage. The Department of the Interior told its employees that Democrats are blocking the continuing resolution. The National Archives sent out an email saying Democrats are blocking this resolution. So is the Social Security Administration and the Department of Commerce. And here's an email I got from the Department of Veterans Affairs, because I'm a veteran. I'm no longer a federal government employee, but I'm a veteran, and it says, as you may be aware, funding for some government agencies, including portions of the Department of Veterans Affairs, expired at midnight this morning, whatever midnight this morning means. President Trump opposes a lapse in appropriations. Does he? Does he? And on September 19th, the House of Representatives passed, with the Trump administration's support, a clean continuing resolution to fund the government through November 21st. Unfortunately, Democrats are blocking this continuing resolution in the U.S. Senate due to unrelated policy demands. Now, that email also went out to all recipients of veterans' benefits. So it's not just federal workers getting this propaganda in their inbox, it's tens of millions of veterans and veterans' dependents. And get this, agencies sent out recommended out-of-office reply language for furloughed employees, blaming the Democrats. And NBC reported that 5 furloughed employees put up a nonpartisan out-of-office message only to see they were changed without their permission to partisan messages that blame Democrats. So the Republicans know this is wildly unpopular. But what you might not know is that they can end this shutdown right now, anytime, with 0 Democratic votes. I recently covered a story on the Daily Beans podcast that Senate Republicans changed the rules just about 3 weeks ago so they could push through 48 Trump nominees at once. The New York Times reported that Republicans, quote, bulldozed past Senate precedents and changed the rules to break a Democratic blockade of President Trump's nominees. The change pushed through along party lines, lowered the existing 60-vote threshold for considering a group of presidential nominees to a simple majority. Now, I spoke to a couple of congressional staffers who are experts on the nuclear option to find out if the same is true for a continuing resolution, and they confirmed it is. Republicans in the Senate can pretty much change the rules however they want and whenever they want with just 51 votes. They can even write something as narrow as literally nuking the filibuster for just this one bill by creating a resolution that's a rule and going nuclear on just that one rule so they don't even create a broader precedent. Well, maybe Republicans just forgot that they can change the rules whenever they want. I mean, to be fair, this happened 3 weeks ago. Maybe they can't hold that reality in their heads for 3 weeks. But look at this tweet. This tweet that went out from Andrew Desiderio after one of the failed votes to fund the government. It says, John Thune has scheduled votes for this weekend on Friday and Saturday, and those government funding bills will have a 60-vote threshold. But it says, look, they'll also be voting on a package of 100-plus Trump nominees, which they can now do with a simple majority because Republicans just changed the rules. So they know. They know they can stop this shutdown anytime they want. But they won't, because they want the shutdown. And we didn't have to wait too long for Trump to openly admit it either.
A lot of good can come down from shutdowns. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things, but they want open borders. They want men playing in women's sports. They want transgender for everybody. They never stop. They don't learn. We won an election in a landslide. They just don't learn. So we have no choice. I have to do that for the country.
But Mike Johnson promises that Trump and the head of the Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought, take no pleasure, absolutely no pleasure in this.
They have now effectively turned off the legislative branch, the Article 2 branch of, or the Article 1, sorry, the Article 1 branch of our government, and they've turned it over to the executive, okay? So in that situation, when Congress turns off the funding and the funding runs out, it is up to the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, to determine how those resources will be spent. He has that responsibility given to him by the Democrats in the Senate. They can't complain about it, and he doesn't want to do it. But in this scenario, what they have to do is make very difficult decisions. Most of the responsibility falls to Russ Vought. He's the director of the Office of Management and Budget, as you know. Whomever is seated in the chair at OMB during a shutdown has to do the same thing. Russ does this reluctantly. We had a 45-minute telephone conference with him yesterday. He talked to all the House Republicans. He takes no pleasure in this.
Russ does this reluctantly. He takes no pleasure in this? Really? Because your buddy, Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, says the opposite.
But this is what they're doing. They're doing it deliberately. It's going to harm them. Because Russ Vought, the OMB director, has been dreaming about this moment, preparing this moment since puberty. Russ Vought has a plan, and that plan is going to succeed in further empowering Trump. This is going to be the Democrats' worst nightmare, and it's of their own making.
Yeah. His dream since puberty? Why puberty? Gross. TMI. And if I'm being honest, I don't need to know all that. But Schumer, on Friday, held their ground. The Democrats held their ground. They didn't want to rip health care from tens of millions of people. That's the bargaining chip Democrats are going with, because open enrollment in the ACA plan starts now, and those discounts expire in just a few months. And Republicans are, of course, lying about what Democrats are asking for. They're saying, their line is that we want to give trillions of dollars in health care to undocumented people. And when reporters point out that undocumented immigrants aren't eligible for the ACA stuff or Medicare or Medicaid, Republicans trot out the same bullshit argument they've been making since forever, that our emergency rooms are overflowing with undocumented immigrants. And the next couple of follow-up questions to that statement should be easy. Ask them what law allows immigrants to get emergency care. The answer is EMTALA. It's a Republican law. It was signed by Reagan. This same old tired argument has been around so long. Here's me 6 years ago, rebutting it to some douche canoe on Twitter. The second follow-up question, take the argument to its conclusion. If an undocumented child comes into an emergency room, let's say, with a gunshot wound. Wait, don't use gunshot wounds. They don't care about gunshot wounds. Okay, go on. Say Mary Magdalene comes into the ER, and she's not here legally, and she needs an emergency C-section to save her unborn baby. Are you, Republicans, saying that the doctor should just refuse to treat her? Ask them that question. Because that's their ultimate argument, isn't it? That only certain human beings deserve life-saving emergency care, and we should just let people die right in front of us when we could otherwise save them. Now, the good news is that their lies aren't working. A new poll shows an overwhelming 78% of Americans want Congress to extend their Obamacare credits. That's just an unheard of number. And it's proof that in the face of all the Republican propaganda, the truth is breaking through. And don't forget, Mike Johnson sent the House home instead of working on a budget, bill, instead of solving this problem, because he's avoiding calls to release the Epstein files. But save the date, because this Wednesday, October 8th, Ro Khanna, Tom Massey, and MTG are going to hold a press conference with Epstein survivors to discuss the discharge petition. All right, up next. We all know that every accusation is a confession in the Trump administration. It's part of the abuser's manifesto, right? DARVO. Deny, attack, and reverse a victim and an offender. So when Trump accuses Biden of using the auto pen, even taking it as far as replacing Biden's portrait in the White House with a picture of an auto pen, that definitely means that Trump is not in control of his own pen. We've seen Trump sign executive orders having no idea what he's signing and having to ask the people in the room what he's even doing. They even control the information he gets, which is evidenced by Trump admitting that he was being shown videos of fires and violence in Portland on the ground, only to find out that's not the reality after talking to the governor of Oregon. We also know that nobody told him about the assassination of the Hortmans in Minnesota because he said he'd never heard of them or that when he was asked about right-wing violence during a recent press conference. Trump is nothing more than an empty bad suit with a too long tie, and Stephen Miller is calling all the shots. And they're using Russ Vought and Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel as the expediters, as evidenced by the story this week that Stephen Miller is the one pulling the strings in the indiscriminate murder of Venezuelans in the Caribbean. According to 3 Guardian sources familiar with the matter, Miller's influence over the strikes at times even superseded that of Marco Rubio, who is President Trump's Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. This comes as Miller continues to consolidate power in the Homeland Security Council, the HSC. And we know that Trump doesn't know what the hell Hegseth is going to do until after the fact. Public reporting indicates Trump didn't know about Hegseth calling hundreds of generals and admirals to Quantico in Virginia. But once Trump found out, he wanted some stage time. He insisted on speaking in front of them. He and Hegseth then proceeded to call them fat and lazy, told them to chase women out of the military, no more combat jobs, and then said they should use American cities as training grounds for warfare. It was so egregious. And Dem Rep Madeline Dean cornered Mike Johnson to tell him about it, along with the fact that Trump is unwell and unfit.
The president is unhinged. He is unwell. What
are you doing? A lot of folks on your side are too. I don't control.
Oh my God, please. That performance in front of the generals,
I didn't see it.
is so dangerous. You know I serve on Foreign Affairs and Appropriations.
Yes.
It's a collision of those two things. Our allies are looking elsewhere. Our enemies are laughing.
I just left
you
the
have a
speaker's
president
side.
who is you have a president who is unwell.
We're seeing him carry out that promise in Oregon and Chicago right now. Trump called up 200 National Guard to Portland. He was swiftly sued in court. The city and the state filed for an emergency hearing, asking for a temporary restraining order, and Trump's Justice Department argued that they shouldn't get an emergency hearing. It's not appropriate because this isn't an emergency. Even though they say the reason they have to deploy the guard is because there's an emergency. So there's no emergency, but there's definitely an emergency. It's Schrodinger's emergency, I guess. The case was assigned to Judge Simon originally, who had to recuse himself because his wife is a state rep who vocally opposes the deployment of the Guard troops to Portland. So Judge Simon recused. The case was reassigned to a Trump appointee, Judge Immergut, who held an emergency hearing on Friday. And on Saturday, that judge granted the temporary restraining order blocking Trump from deploying the Guard for now. The Trump-appointed judge, this is a Trump-appointed judge, Judge Immergut, warned that the president's bad faith assessment of a war-ravaged Portland as justification to deploy the Guard could plunge the country into unconstitutional military rule. But check this out. Remember in 2020, during the peaceful George Floyd protests, a lot of right-wing violent extremists were arrested for infiltrating the protests and causing real damage and inciting real violence. Well, look at this. MAGA influencer, interloper, Nick Sorter, who's 27, he's from Washington, D.C., he was arrested on suspicion of second-degree disorderly conduct on Friday. So this guy traveled to Portland from D.C., got into a fight with a couple of Portlanders, and was arrested. And now the DOJ is investigating. But they're not investigating him. They're investigating the Portland police for arresting him. Assistant Attorney General Hermeet Dillon posted, quote, "Portland, it's FO time, buckle up." Attorney General Pam Bondi called this guy, Sorter, on Friday morning and promised that she would investigate his wrongful arrest. And now, Caroline Leavitt says Trump is reviewing what kind of federal funding he can pull from Oregon. So that's how it's going to be now. If you stop the regime from inciting violence, your police department will be investigated, and your state funding will be pulled. That is a shakedown. Trump already defunded the police in D.C., in part when the big billionaire bailout bill blocked $1.1 billion in funding from the District of Columbia. He tried to defund the police in New York this week to the tune of $150 million, but he faced huge bipartisan opposition, and he balked. And now they're investigating the Portland Police Department. It seems like he wants to replace our local police with his masked Gestapo. I'm guessing partly because he controls them, and partly because ICE is a lot looser with your constitutional rights, particularly the Fourth Amendment. But they are not going to keep me from exercising my First Amendment rights. I will be on the street with my megaphone on October 18th for No Kings 2. I'll be protesting things like the fact that the ICE agent that slammed that woman into the ground at 26 Federal Plaza we told you about last week is back on duty after only 2 days. I'll be marching for the journalist, Mario Guevara. The Washington Post reports that the Emmy Award-winning reporter was deported on Friday to his native country of El Salvador, a nation he fled more than 2 decades ago after being threatened and assaulted. Guevara, an independent journalist and founder of an online news outlet, was arrested on June 14th at the Atlanta area while covering a protest to the Trump administration. Police charged him with failing to disperse and standing in the roadway, but those counts were quickly dropped. Despite the dismissals, he was transferred from county jail to immigration custody at the request of ICE. Guevara came to the United States legally in 2004 on a tourist visa. After fleeing persecution in El Salvador because of his work as a journalist, in 2005 he applied for asylum, and that was denied 7 years later, in 2012. According to the Post, he was granted voluntary departure, which means you can leave on your own volition, on your own dime, but within a specific time frame. And he appealed that decision, and they administratively closed his case the same year. That paused his deportation indefinitely. He got a U.S. work permit, then filed for a green card through his son, who is a citizen. But a court ruled Thursday that because he made a mistake on his application form, he's eligible for deportation. I'll be protesting the fact that this past Tuesday in Chicago, armed federal agents in camouflage and full kit rappelled from helicopters and raided an apartment building, breaking down doors, pulling out men, women, and children, some of whom were not wearing clothes. Apparently, the reason they used to justify this military operation on U.S. soil was that one citizen living there had a warrant out, and DHS told reporters they had heard that Tren de Aragua hung out in that building. Tren de Aragua, the same justification they used to kidnap and disappear 250 men to Seacoat in El Salvador, most of whom are not criminals or gang members. Tren de Aragua is also the justification Trump is using to bomb boats of migrants and fishermen in the Caribbean, so he can declare an armed conflict to further secure emergency powers. And now they claim Tren de Aragua is why they invaded this apartment complex in the south side of Chicago. Apart from the helicopters, they used flashbang grenades and drones. They dragged these people out of their homes, put them in the back of U-Haul vans. 4 children who were U.S. citizens were separated from their parents and zip-tied to each other. Photos of the aftermath show piles of their belongings in the middle of apartments, broken windows, and paperwork, including birth certificates, strewn around. And something worth noting, this story broke out of political circles and into People magazine. Just like 78% of Americans want Congress to extend the Affordable Care credits, the fact that this story ended up in People magazine indicates that the truth is breaking through to the general public about this as well, and it's not trapped in the pundit sphere. I imagine more stories will break through if we keep taking video and keep amplifying them. And now we have reports of shots fired by ICE at a U.S. citizen in Chicago shortly before Governor Pritzker said Trump's Department of War has given him an ultimatum to deploy the guard against his own citizens, or Trump will do it himself. And Tricia McLaughlin, the very dishonest spokesperson for DHS, claims that ICE agents were jammed in by 10 cars and then opened fire on a woman who had a gun, who then drove herself to the hospital. But there are already conflicting reports. A Chicago Fire Department spokesman said she didn't drive herself to the hospital. She was found on 39th and Pershing and was taken to the Mount Sinai Hospital. I mean, look at this. Look at this. Federal agents invading a suburban neighborhood with flashlights and military gear, terrorizing the community. It's absolutely dystopian. Now, as you know, I like to try to end the show on an up note. And today I have two. First, in the case against Comey. Lindsay Halligan is running into even more issues with her indictment. Forget for a moment that the lie she says Comey told isn't something that Comey even said in his testimony. And forget for a moment that the grand jury wasn't close to unanimous on the 2 counts and actually refused to indict on the 3rd. And forget that this case is one of the best candidates to dismiss on vindictive and selective prosecution grounds. Forget all that for a minute. And think about the fact that Lindsay Halligan might not even have the authority to indict Jim Comey. You might recall that recently a judge ruled Alina Habba didn't have authority as U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. And also this week, a judge found that the Trump interim U.S. Attorney in Nevada, Sigal Chattah, wasn't appointed properly either. And in that case, a criminal defendant, filed a motion to dismiss the charges against him, saying that she didn't have the authority as the U.S. Attorney. Now, the judge found that Chattah was, in fact, installed improperly and has no authority. But the judge did not dismiss the indictment in that case because it was actually signed by another prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office. But guess what? Nobody besides Lindsay Halligan signed the Comey indictment. So if it's found that she has no authority because Trump violated the rules to put her there, the DOJ would actually have to go back to a grand jury in the Comey case and start over. Oh, but wait, they can't, because the statute of limitations on Comey's 2020 testimony expired last Tuesday at midnight in the morning. And I guess Lindsay Halligan will have to go back to her guest appearances on South Beach Tow. No, I am not kidding.
Are you okay?
Can you please pass me my phone?
Yeah.
Appreciate that. It's broken, bro. Do me a favor. Go to the truck, grab the mic, call Bernice, and tell her to please bring me some bolt cutters. Tell her I'm on 16 in Michigan.
All right.
Now hurry up, please. There's some guys coming back.
Okay.
Tell her Eddie's in trouble.
I got some bitch down here from Tremont Towing.
Hello, Bernice, are you there?
What is this?
Hey,
You don't know me, but your friend Eddie's handcuffed.
Tell her Eddie's in trouble.
He's handcuffed to a fence, and he wanted me to call Bernice.
You gotta be kidding me, right?
I don't really know what happened.
I can't
but
you,
we're
huh?
on 16th in Michigan, and you need to get here, immediately.
You're not going anywhere.
Tell Eddie I'll be there as soon as I'm done with this.
But now the Trump administration is demanding a physical arrest and perp walk of Comey. CBS News reports that leadership asked for large, beefy agents to conduct an arrest of Comey in full kit, including Kevlar and exterior wear emblazoned with the FBI logo. It was suggested that a supervisory special agent in the Violent Crimes Division of the FBI Washington Field Office would be able to put together the kinds of agents who fit the bill. That agent, however, refused to participate in this plan, believing it would be inappropriate and highly unusual for a white-collar defendant like Comey to have a perp walk. That guy was then suspended for insubordination. I wonder if Comey will sell mugshot t-shirts. Though Agony Flips on Blue Sky, I think, has the winning idea. So Comey, if you're listening, sleep in your shoes and a Release the Epstein Files t-shirt. All right, one final up note on the breakdown today. Lots of criminal defendants file motions to dismiss for vindictive and selective prosecution, but it's very rare that anyone wins those motions. It's a high bar to meet, incredibly difficult burden to get those cases dismissed. And it's hard because prosecutors have broad discretion and trust from the courts. And the defendant has an extremely high evidentiary burden because the legal system is supposed to operate on the presumption of regularity, meaning the courts are supposed to be able to trust what the federal government says. But that's not the case anymore. And federal judges have taken note. Judge Paul Friedman said in August, in just 6 months, the President of the United States may have forfeited the right to such a presumption of regularity. Regarding the Department of Government, so-called Department of Government Efficiency's attempts to hire and fire federal workers, Judge Tanya Chutkin said, quote, defense counsel is reminded of their duty to make truthful representations to the court. You shouldn't have to remind them of that, but they are. And during a hearing in the Abrego Garcia case, the judge said, quote, you have taken the presumption of regularity and you've destroyed it, in my view. Now, I talked a minute ago about Comey having a really good chance to win a vindictive and selective prosecution motion. And on other podcasts, I've talked about New Jersey Representative LaMonica McIver also having a really good chance to have her motion dismissed. And I've talked about Kilmar Abrego Garcia and his motion to dismiss on the same grounds. And on Friday, a federal judge agreed, Judge Crenshaw. He has ordered discovery and an evidentiary hearing in the matter. Quote, in sum, Abrego has carried his burden of demonstrating some evidence that the prosecution against him may be vindictive. The government bears the burden of rebutting the presumption with objective on-the-record explanations like governmental discovery of previously unknown evidence or previous legal impossibility. For now, the court will grant Abrego's request for discovery and an evidentiary hearing. This is really huge news. This is really big. You know, this week, Pope Leo said that you can't call yourself pro-life if you're pro-death penalty, and you cannot call yourself pro-life if you are in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the United States. I hope the people who need to hear that are listening. Everyone, I'm Allison Gill. Thanks for watching The Breakdown.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.